I want you to know that I am on this like secret group chat now of like people who are committed to like social justice at MCC, and it
Okay.
grows by the day, and it's like I don't know who half of the phone numbers are, and I think we should bomb Yemen, but the whole thing, well, like
What?
the group chat thing that happened in the news.
Oh,
Anyway, come on.
yes. No, I'm caught up. I'm caught up. That was on SNL. I
It,
got it.
but it was like a thing that happened in real world. That's why it was on SNL, where the reporter gets added to the group chat. Anyway,
Yeah, they did a cold open about it.
they did. It was funny. It was good. Oh my god, though. Okay, and then we can actually get started. The SNL bit with like the eagle screech when one person
Yeah, the
like,
one-uppers sketch.
oh my
Yeah,
god, it was so good.
that was very
That's
funny.
so real, though.
My favorite thing from like sketch comedy stuff is when they make each other break.
Yes.
Like that's what is always funny for me. Like it's like, yeah, you're enjoying this yourself. Like that's right.
So when Jessica and I co-teach, it's like that, because like we'll come up with the same idea and she'll look at me and she'll be like, we're so in sync, and I'm like, well, I'm totally Justin Timberlake and you're Joey Fatone, and like we'll crack up and the students are like, who the hell, like they know who
Who's
Justin
NSYNC?
Timberlake is. Yes, but
Yeah.
that's about it. um so I was really excited to listen to our podcast on Apple Podcast today. It feels like legit, even though every bozo can use Apple Podcast. It still felt serious.
Every bozo does use Apple Pie. Like every bozo does make a
Like
podcast.
me. It's
Yeah.
true. I put it into Chat GPT. It was written by one of our vice presidents, and when I put it into Chat GPT, 85% of it was detected as AI.
How does it know when it's AI though? Like whenever it's like 85%, I'm just like, is it AI or does somebody just neuro spicy?
This person is not neurospicy.
Okay.
Okay.
I heard I think there was an 8-year-old. One of my friends had a conversation with an 8-year-old who was talking about people being neuro sparkly.
Ooh.
And I'm just like, I like that so much better than neuro spicy. It's got that good queer tilt to it. It's
It
just really gonna spread that around our queer community.
sounds like a future. I'm just kidding. It does not sound like a
So
future
anyway,
podcast.
welcome to Coffee Break Classroom.
Brewed for higher ed.
Yeah.
Welcome to Coffee Break Classroom, brewed for higher ed, where teaching meets good vibes. We're just two friends chopping it up. Here you can expect a blend of ridiculous classroom stories, a little educational research, and some practical teaching techniques. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's talk teaching without the grading.
Um, we're gonna talk about formative assessment today. And what's really funny is like I'm gonna admit this because I feel like a lot of people have this problem. For the
Yes.
longest time, I had no idea what the difference was between formative assessment and summative assessment.
So
I just was not clicking to me.
for like a couple months ago, a person who's very senior was like, I just don't know what it is. And I was like, it's actually really easy, and you do know what it is. You just don't know the term.
Yeah. No, I know. I know what they are independently, but I could never remember which one was which. Um,
But it's
and
like
so
the
like what
words. I'm just kidding.
I know. No, I know. That's what I was gonna say. Is like I came up with a way that it helps me to think about it. Is like formative assessment is when the ideas are forming, and
Yes.
summative assessment is when it's the sum up of it's like the sum of everything at the end of it. That's when I
Yes.
got it.
You had this moment, this
Yeah,
aha moment.
I think it was in the first year faculty series that we did. Like that was one of
Really?
the things that yeah, because I just never really thought about it in the terms of what I do education research wise.
Uh huh.
Like it's just like I just do the pedagogy. I don't know what it's called. People put names on stuff.
So I think that's I mean, you do the important part. Do you want to go get your mug? Do you feel like,
No, it's okay.
okay,
It's fine.
are you
We're
sure?
into this. I didn't want to wait too long to get started.
All right.
No, I'll get my mug next time. I washed it. It's sitting on my counter in the kitchen.
I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
Do you only have one mug?
No, I have several mugs. There's a mug right here that I have like holding
What the
my
hell? Oh,
cup.
is that a
It's
wolf?
a yeah.
Did you read about the
Um
dire wolves this week?
No, I feel like you're gonna make me. I feel like I need to start the episode over again.
No,
No,
all
I have
right.
not read about direwolves.
I'll pause that till later. The direwolves is a good story, but go ahead.
Okay, all right. Um, yeah. So I think that was where I wanted to start was talking about the difference between the two of them, right? So formative assessment is the stuff where you're like doing it frequently, it's ongoing, it's low stakes. So, like that's the stuff that when I was in grad school, being a TA, we're doing that all the time. So we don't
Right.
necessarily give it a name.
Mm-hmm.
And then summative assessment is usually like you're just doing that a few times, and it's usually high stakes for students.
Yes. And it's at the end to assess the summation of what has been learned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a good way. I felt that would be good for people coming into this episode. Maybe if you weren't sure about the difference, it'd be a good
100%.
place to start. Yeah,
This is a safe place to not know all of the educational lingo.
for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So
So yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that you are a person who enjoys board games, and I told you this yesterday, but I feel like this is a little bit like Scattergories, where we've each kind of come up with our own list of formative and summative assessments, and then we're going to kind of volley it back and forth. And every time you come up with something that's already on my list, I'm going to have to cross it out. So I'm a little
Unless you,
competitive, but not too
uh,
competitive.
unless you have something that's like useful to add, then like feel free to jump in.
Oh,
But
I
since it's
do.
competitive, I'll go first. So one of the things, one of the things that I do in my classroom is that multiple choice kind of voting,
Yes.
those multiple choice voting cards. So this, for me, like a lot of these questions actually started out as weekly reflections,
Cool.
which is something that I did when I was a postdoc, where one of the things that the students would do each week would be to answer a couple questions, a little bit about like content and a little bit about like how's it going with the content. So kind of like that both sides of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I started developing those when I was here and I was running those, and they were like participation credit and like 5% of the grade. And I'm like still getting students who like are just not filling them out. And I'm like, this is not really something I want to keep in the grade because it's like the difference, 5% could be the difference of like a letter grade
Oh,
for
for sure.
students. And I felt really guilty, like still doing weekly reflections when it wasn't really like complete demonstration of content. So I kind of turn them into things that I do in the class because what I would do is take the results and I would put the polls together and I would share the results with the students in class. Now I'm just using the time in class to ask the question and have
Mm-hmm.
them do it there. And we give them colored cards where you can have them all printed out on one sheet and students will show the letter A, B, C, D. You can use the back side of the paper for E if you want.
Yes.
It's like blank. And it's a good way of getting students to knowing right then and there, like, did students pick up what you want them to pick up? Or if you use it at the beginning, right, do they remember what you want them to remember from next time and do a little bit of cueing into what you're going to be talking about that day?
So I use those as well. I think so. I always make them just put the card right under their chin so no one else
Hmm.
can see what they're showing. But what do you do when you ask a question and it's either all over the place or the answer's wrong? What do you do at that point?
Oh, I usually, well, so if it's all over the place, I make them talk to each other and I was like, try and convince your neighbor like
Mm-hmm.
what the answer is. And it's sometimes funny because then they'll all talk to each other and they'll psych each other out and then come back with the wrong answer. And I'll be like, okay, so let's have a like deeper conversation about what's going on here. I'll usually seed a couple things and then like they'll remember what it is that I want them to remember.
It doesn't
So just
always
give,
work.
no, it does not. It does not always work. My favorite thing though is that like these are students who know how this work, and I'm still getting it this semester after they had several classes with me. But I put up the question, and somebody will go, "Oh, it's A," just out loud, like
They're so excited.
child, have you not figured out how this works yet? Like you've been doing, yeah. They're too excited about it.
Cool. Well, I do something. I did it today called Fix the Mistake. Jessica, my chair, who I talk about all the time, she calls it What's Wrong? But so this came about. I mean, I learned this in a workshop, but I think it's genius because students love to look at the handouts and the papers that you give them and find and be like, did you mean 4 here and not 3? And you're like, yes, I did. They love to point out your mistakes, right? And so I give them a series of statements And I tell them they're all wrong and they have to fix the mistake, make it right, and make the sentence complete. I think that's a good thing. I did it this today. I broke the groups into pairs so that they can work together. I let them use their notes, so it's a good kind of retrieval mechanism if you use it
Mm-hmm.
that way, because it was based on the last class's material. So they went back through their notes, they pulled out the same stuff. Other times in the one I did today, I also used some graphs, and I said, this stage in this graph represents this. And so I think it's a good way to reinforce like graph or map reading skills too, if it's a more visual class too.
I actually learned I learned that technique from you,
Oh,
like in the second year faculty
really?
series. Like that was, yeah, you did that with one of the reading about the retrieval chapter.
I remember
Like you, you,
actually.
you did a fix a mistake. And I was like, this is nice. And when I went and started kind of like building in some of the review sections into a couple places, there's a couple places in my physics class where I actually do this now.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have done in the previous class some simulations about friction and like we'll learn some stuff. And then we'll go into the next class where we're going to apply the math and we'll have all of those, like I'll have 5 wrong statements up there and I'll be
Nice.
like, talk to your neighbor and about these. And then like, we're going to come back and fix them. So I
Fun.
do that in a couple different places in my physics class now.
Fun. Cool.
Yeah, it works well.
It does. All right, you're up.
Yeah. The next one that I had on here is the one that I mentioned at the end of the last video.
Oh,
Um,
yes. Oh, I'm out of focus.
yeah, I didn't know what this was called. I don't even think it is called this, but somebody called it fist to five. It's not, I know.
I feel like that should be on our list of no words that we mentioned in our first episode.
The five?
No.
So
No,
this
not
is
the
not
five.
necessarily this is not necessarily used like to kind of get their sense of content understanding, but it's kind of getting their sense of comfort.
Mm.
Looking at where they feel they are. So it's a little bit of a self-assessment, which can be a type of formative thing also. It also gives you a chance to see if you need to, back up the bus. If any of your students fell off the bus and you need to back it up.
So, can you
So
explain for those folks who didn't yet listen to episode 2 what is Fist to Five?
if you have a better name for it, you can call it whatever you would like.
Oh my God.
But it's an idea of if you're kind of teaching something, you can ask students to gauge their comfort with the content that you just covered.
Do
So
you
it was
like have them look at, so do they see what everyone is holding up? Like, is it a private thing?
no, I think that's more of a private thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, even my voting cards, I do like they can display them however they would like.
Gotcha.
Some students I have will just kind of like flip through the letters and just put it on their desk.
Yeah.
Depending on how big the classroom is and how closely packed they all are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it can be a private thing. It can like that's kind of to their own extent of how far away they want to hold their hand. But
Fair.
yeah, if they're not feeling comfortable at all, right, they don't put up any fingers, so it's just going to be their fist. And then if they're super comfortable with the content, then that's all the way up to 5. There was actually the faculty that called it fist to 5 was talking about it the other day and how there are some students who like leave and still don't get it, even though they held up like a 3 or something like that. And it's just, he wanted to make really sure that it's just like, don't be afraid to put up a 1. And I thought that was really nice
That's nice.
thought. Like, if you're not comfortable with it, like, just put up a 1. I need to know as the instructor, like, whether or not you feel comfortable taking this away from the classroom.
Yes. That's a good one.
But sometimes our students will think they're comfortable and then they're not
Oh,
comfortable,
100%.
which will lead into my next thing. So,
Ooh. Well, my next thing is, I think it's just called put in order. But what I'll do if sometimes I teach things that have like a chronology to them, like first this happens, then this happens, then this happens. Any sort of like process in science you can use like this, or like a writing process, I suppose. Any process I think this works for, or history. Where you give students, you can give them a series of events. And what I like to do to make it easy as the instructor is I will put them in groups of like this. You can do anywhere between 2 and 4 students. And I will make each step a different, I will have it on a different color sheet of paper. So, and then I give them maybe, depending on how many steps, 5 to 7 this works for, and I say, put these in order. And the purpose of having each step being a different color is that as the instructor, you can kind of mill around and you can see if it's the right color pattern. So you put them in order. So like you can put it in like the order of the rainbow. So you can have the first strip is pink, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. And so then I can walk around really easily and see that the orange step is out of order rather than just kind of hovering over them and reading all the words.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty easy. So I find that I probably can only use like once or twice a semester because
Mm-hmm.
once they pick up that there is a pattern, then you either have to, in the next one, you can't use the same color pattern or you have to just switch it up entirely.
I thought about trying to use that. I can't really come to anything that has like a set of steps that's worth
Okay.
putting in where you need like 5 or 6 of them.
No. Hang
Yeah.
on, Mike.
The next thing that I was going to talk about was that I will often have students work out problems like in class, like during class time. Because that's a good sense of formative assessment, and it's a good way of seeing like, well, do you actually feel comfortable like with the content that you're doing? And I didn't actually know what to call this, but then I realized as I was like looking at a list of formative assessment stuff so I could compete with you and have more things in categories, that this is basically exit tickets,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yes.
I give students something to do that they check in with me before they leave the room so that we all know that they're ending in the right spot.
Yes.
Um, so like we'll often work through problems together where like maybe I'll get one started or like I'll be asking for different people, different sections of the room to like answer a particular question. Um, I usually like to wait until I hear an answer a couple times before like I tell them that it's right. Like
Yeah.
so students really don't raise their hands in my classroom,
It's a
mostly
free for all. I've seen
because
it.
that's what I've cultivated.
It is.
Like I don't like making eye contact. It's social anxiety, so I just make them shout out their answers. There is a little bit of truth to that, but I don't mind, right? We're all in a big environment. Or sometimes what I'll do is set up a portion of the problem and then like have them kind of finish it out. And I actually did that today where we did a graphing example, we did a couple ranking tasks, and then there was a new question and I was like, so it was 2 wheels and they were different sizes and they were connected by a conveyor belt. And students had to rank the speed of the belt and the rate that the big wheel spun. If the small wheel spun the same rate each time, and then they had a bunch of different information about
Oh.
radii, and they had to rank it based on like the different sizes and
Oh,
how
that's
that
fun.
related to speed. So it's a lot of rotation and translation type stuff. Um, and we had done some examples, and I was like, you have to decide, is the rotational speed the same, or is the speed of the belt the same? And then once you know what that is, then here's like what the equations are that you need to use. Now work with each other, do your rankings, and then check with me before you leave. So I think that worked really well today.
That's cool.
But it helps me see immediately where they're struggling, right? Like if I give them enough in class where then they can go and try it on their own, I can be like, okay, this person gets it, this person doesn't get it. I know where students are and where they kind of like filter out, like
Mm-hmm.
sediment, right? To bring it back to geology for no
Ooh, just
reason.
like sediment.
Yeah. This is really nice because I have an SI. So I have a supplemental
Oh,
instructor.
okay.
Like it's kind of like a teaching assistant
So
that
are they
goes
in the
around.
class with you?
Yes, I
Oh,
have
cool.
40 students in that class.
Oh, that's a
So
lot of bodies. Yeah.
yeah, that's a lot of bodies. It's not something I could do on my own. So like if
Yes.
you have the option for supplemental instruction, I definitely would champion that.
That's cool. I think that's a good point that some of these strategies are going to work really well in big classes, like the
Hmm.
ABCD cards, for example, or even the put in order strips. You could do that in a bigger class. But some of them are more challenging for sure.
Yeah,
Not one tool for all problems. I think that's something we keep
100%.
coming back to. So picking up with your idea about an exit ticket, I haven't done this in a while, but I have a stoplight that is laminated and on the wall, just like normal stoplights, red, yellow, green. And sometimes I'll do this at the end of the class, especially if the class is a little quiet and it's hard to kind of gauge your class. Well, so your class is not quiet, but I'm guessing that there are some students who are not as loud as all the other students.
Yes.
So this is a technique where you hear from every student, and even the quiet ones that are sometimes harder to tease apart. So I have actually a quiet class. I should be doing this more often than I am. And the idea is that you hand out Post-its to the students, and they can take between one or three of them, and they put a Post-it on the color that they feel most represents their learning for the day. The green would be like, one thing I know for sure is this. And they would put that, and then on their way out, they put their Post-its wherever they think it should be. If they feel fuzzy on a topic, and they want to hear more about it, I have them put a Post-it on yellow. Like, I don't really understand what you meant about grain size today. So they would put that on there.
Yeah. And just to clarify, like you're having them write stuff on the Post-it notes.
Correct. And as they
Yeah.
exit the classroom, they put it on the correct color for each Post-it note. And then if there was something that stopped their learning, which they don't even understand what that means, but like one thing you definitely didn't understand today, and you put that
Like a
on the
hang
red.
up.
Yes. So then they leave the class, and then I have instant feedback that I can then use to frame the next class.
The next thing that I have on here is just talking about, well, I guess we're talking about formative assessment. We got to have a little bit of a conversation about homework assignments.
Oh, let's do
Like
it.
stuff that we're giving students to take home and work on. Like this is definitely like the major formative type of assessment, where it's there for students to learn and it's there for students to make mistakes. And it's often something that they can do as a way of self-assessing as well. This is actually something that I've stopped grading all of my homework assignments just because of that mentality. Like, this is for you to make mistakes. This is for you to practice the content that we've learned in class. So I will give students like the final answer so they get that immediate feedback. And if you have an online homework software, like this is going to do that for you automatically.
Right.
But I also don't want to make students pay for online homework software if they
Yes.
don't have to,
Sure.
right? So I outlined these assignments doing some of that transparency and learning and teaching style of stuff where I went and put together a bunch of learning targets. Like, what are the things that I want you to get out of doing these assignments? Here's what I want you to be able to do from class. And then on the assignment, it's like, here's these targets that this assignment is going to help you meet. And they can kind of use that as like a self-assessment. I've got some help and hints on there for them if they get stuck, which is all compiled from students who come to me in office hours in the past. So whenever anybody comes to ask a question, like I go put a little extra note in the help and hints because that's there to kind of help guide students along the path. And then they have that answers for that immediate feedback.
That's cool. That's cool. I don't really assign a ton of homework, because I don't want to grade it, but I don't want to grade it. Grading is probably the least fun part of our job.
Agreed.
So
That's one reason why, like, because I was using an online homework software and I was like, this does all of the grading for you. But then I was just like, it's expensive. And I'm like, but I was like, I don't want to grade it either.
Yes. So one of the things that I did during COVID, I think this is build a lot of in our like learning management system. We use Brightspace, but you can do this, and I'm pretty well in all of the learning management systems I've had the opportunity to use. They offer like unlimited submissions, and you can't test everything this way for sure. But for students who are not native English speakers, for students who are looking to review before an exam, I find online mastery quizzes, things that they can go in and take to make sure that they understand the terminology, to make sure they understand some of the major concepts, is super useful. And I've had my most successful students go in and and complete all of them before exams. I make these available because I developed them all during COVID. I mean, obviously it was really intensive. We were at home all the time. And so I developed a lot of them then. I still use a lot of them. And even in my face-to-face classes, they're not for points necessarily, but it's just something that they can do, and don't have to worry if they don't understand it and they mess it up. Like, it's not for points. It's just for their own understanding of where they are at that point.
Yeah. And I will say for people out there too that are just be like, wait a minute, did he just say that he doesn't do homework assignments? Like I when I was looking at my assignments to kind of break things down
Mm-hmm.
and see which way stuff wanted to go, I broke stuff up into like based on what the goal of the question was. Is it just for practice
Yeah.
or is it a much more deeper problem that I actually do care and I want to see students do?
Yeah.
And if it's one that I do want them to do, I pivot it off into like a little project kind of assignment.
Okay.
So it does give them a chance. Like I do kind of give them some feedback on stuff because that's the one thing that's missing when you're not grading homework assignments
For sure.
is that feedback, right? Like it's you have to figure out how to build that in.
So for people who like I can see our math faculty or math faculty in general being a little
Mm-hmm.
freaked out by not requiring homework for grades. Did you have like a good experience when you made that transition? Like how did it work?
Ooh, that's a really nice question. S- So there was like it was not a like cut and shift. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was a transition, right? So I started off with still having homework be graded, but like there was no late penalty.
Okay.
So stuff was just kind of open. That did not go very well. Um, because that meant a lot of students were saving the practice until the end because like it was still part of their final grade, but like they weren't, I'm going to use the word motivated to like do the assignment the first time. And a lot of them would kind of say that and ask like, can you please like give us deadlines and I'm like, you have a deadline. It has a deadline on there. And like there's just no late penalty. Like and they're like, well, give us a late penalty. And I was like, you want me to punish you? Like you're not going to do your work unless there's a threat of punishment. Like something's wrong with this mindset
Yeah.
like that we're approaching homework with. Um Shifting away from that. And so they were basically asking me to bring like hard deadlines back. And I was like, okay, sure. Let's just not grade homework anymore. So I like took it out completely
Mm-hmm.
and like it took some adjusting. But I think students are in a really good spot with that because what I do require um, is that they get the homework submitted before they like get a retake, which is going to be one of the next things that I was going to talk about. So we can kind of pivot into that.
I
Um,
have some more formative things first.
oh, okay. Well, I was going to say we could talk about retakes and then you can come back to your
Okay.
like formative stuff.
Sounds good. That's more of like a
Okay.
summative evaluation. That's what I was thinking about. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, not if you have a retake built
Oh,
in.
touche. All right, tell me more.
That's exactly right. Like that's what I was trying to say when I was thinking about this because they were listed like quizzes are often thought of as like formative
So
assessment.
I wrote quizzes down and then I was like, but are they? It depends on the structure of your class.
Yes, right. And like I use quizzes as both formative and summative assessment, and I have exams that are both formative and summative assessment because I have one built-in retake for each thing that they do in class. Like it's built into the way in
Mm-hmm.
into the class. So like it's up to the student to decide whether or not that grade that they got, whether or not that first version of the quiz was the summative or formative assessment, right?
Okay.
Like they get to take it and they get to see did like was I able to demonstrate enough of my learning that I'm like happy with how that was demonstrated? And
Mm-hmm.
if it was, then they're good. That shows me that they've learned. That's the summation of like their understanding of this unit that we covered. But if it isn't, then like, hey, guess what? In like 2 weeks or a week, there's a retake, so you can come back to this
Mm-hmm.
and you can show me that okay, yes, I did learn the things that I needed to learn. So then in essence, that first version became formative assessment, right, in preparation for the actual summative assessment, which was the retake.
I feel like we need to come back to that when we do a whole episode on like growth mindset because that's exactly
Oh, a
what that
hundred
is,
percent,
right?
a hundred
So good.
percent.
So
But
good.
depending on like where things end, right? Because sometimes the summative assessment is just the final if it's cumulative,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you can think about how you can build that into your grade, which is a whole other episode,
Oh,
like a whole
shoot.
nother day. Yeah.
So I teach, and I think a chemist, I mean, I'm sure a chemist could use this, but I think other folks could probably use this as well. I teach about mineral groups in my physical geology class, which is a little niche probably for our audience. But there are certain mineral groups like sulfates, for example. It's one of the major mineral groups, and all sulfate minerals have the sulfate ion, which is SO4 with a charge of
Mhm.
-2 for our chemists in the crowd. And and then we also have the sulfide mineral group, which ends in just a sulfide ion, which is just S with the charge of -1. So then what I do is it's really like a matching activity. I give students, I think there's probably 5 or 6 different mineral groups that I talk about. The silicates is the biggest one. And I have them lay out those cards. I have them do these in pairs. And then I give them the chemical formulas of some minerals. Some they've seen and some they've never seen, but based on the chemical formula and the rules I've just established, like this is a sulfate, this is a silicate, this is a carbonate. They, using the chemical formulas, should be able to match it up and figure out the underlying structure of what it means to be a silicate. What it means to be a silicate. That is ridiculous. But I've also done that with volcanoes. Anytime you have a classification system, like so volcanoes, there's 3, arguably 4 types of volcanoes, depending on who you are. And I'm not going to get into the big volcano
You're not going to pick a side. Pick a side, Amanda.
Nope. I'm going to fence it. You do you in your volcano classification system.
I can volcano do that. Okay.
Oh, I'm going to make that an Instagram reel. So then students get like examples of volcanoes. And once again, based on the classification system, they can kind of go through. I find that especially for like face-to-face students, that it's a pain in the butt for you as the instructor to always be carrying stuff to class, but like giving them something tangible to play with for those kinesthetic learners, as they say, that like, I don't know, there's something that feels very constructive about having stuff to do rather than just whittling away at your notebook, I guess. I don't know. So that's another thing I do.
Nice. Yeah, I can definitely relate to the having to carry your stuff to class. That's why I try and make use of what I have in the classroom as much as possible. We were talking about circular motion and pendulums the other day, and I just picked the mouse up off the computer, and I just grabbed the mouse and hang it by the cord.
That's awesome.
Which is not great. Yeah, don't tell anybody.
No, I won't. But I don't want to give myself credit for too many. Like very similar to the matching activity is using a concept map.
That's what I was going to say is you're talking about your grouping sounds a lot like making a concept map, right?
Yes.
So how these ideas are relating to each other. I mean, that's something that I have wanted to do in my physics class for a while and just haven't had time. And I've tried to use lab and I had everything printed out and then we never did it because I forgot about it and it was on a shelf.
It happens.
But just the fact that like when we go through physics, there's a lot of different equations that we use, but all of the variables are the same because like velocity shows up in several different ways.
For sure.
There's often just like 3 different ways that you're solving problems, either with forces and kinematics, energy and work, or impulse and momentum. They're like 3 different problem solving like pathways you can take, right? And so I wanted an activity where we had all of these equations and I put them there and students had to like I put the variable names on there and students had to connect the variables with equations so they could kind of build this concept map to see how everything was related. And then like this group of stuff over here is like the force and kinematic side of things.
Yes.
This group over here is like going to be when you're doing impulse and momentum. And this group over here is energy and work. But like it's all related. Like you can take multiple paths to get from one to another.
I think that's useful for the underlying structure. And sometimes when students are taking notes, especially if you're in like a lecture where there's maybe a lot of terminology too, I think it's super useful to just take a moment to see how those ideas are actually connected to each other and not just like, I learned 10 new words today, but without any context of why they're important. I start with concept maps often that are very scaffolded sometimes, where I will leave like blanks in the concept maps for them to fill out. And then I've never had a student make a concept map for a chapter, but that shouldn't be that hard to do, especially if they're familiar with the concept and what the expectations are for it.
Yeah, maybe more for like STEM classes that don't require a lot of equations.
Yes.
I feel like most of the stuff that I do is equations.
Not me.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. I exhausted my list because I jumped the queue for one of those. So
that's okay. I only have one more. And that is, which again probably wouldn't work in your mathy class, is is crossword puzzles. There are for classes that require a lot of terminology, which are a lot of STEM classes, but not all.
Hmm.
There are so many online crossword puzzle creators where it's oddly fun because it kind of feels like people do crosswords for fun. And it's like a game, and they'll work hard for that. Anyway, and it's just fun to do at the end of a chapter. So they get to like practice with some vocabulary or ideas that you've thrown around.
I'm going to throw in a couple ideas for crossword puzzles you could do in
Ooh.
your equation type classes.
Yeah.
Because I could just see myself doing those with like the same equations that I'm talking about, right? Because
Yep.
then the crossover is the velocity.
Oh my
So they're
God,
like
that's
filling out,
hilarious.
they're filling out the equation both ways, right? And you
Yes.
could even do it like math way, like in it with math classes if you wanted like algebra. I don't know how an algebra equation would work in there, right? But if you
Mm.
had something and figure out where stuff fits, I don't know.
Ooh, like you could do it. Yeah. No, I think you could actually do it, especially if you were doing like parabola. Like this is a general
Yeah.
parabola equation or the general.
Ooh, good call, good call. Yeah, yeah. Some creative math people will have to get on
Yes. People more creative than us who also teach math.
I don't know about creative, more creative than us, but at least people.
I bet they exist. So one of the things, and then I'm done with my list too, that I think that you need to consider in whenever you're figuring out what your assessment looks like. I wrote down two
Hmm.
questions. What do I really want my students to know? Because
100%.
very often I think in content heavy courses, students can become totally overwhelmed by the volume of information they need to know.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest things for me too when I was reorganizing my courses for these like alternative grading practices that I use
Yes.
is thinking about like what are my units? How does stuff actually break down into topics?
Mm-hmm.
And then what are the things that I need students to walk away with?
Yes.
And like that's my learning targets that I give to students on my homework assignments.
Yeah. And the other thing I think we actually both touched on are what skills are important for my discipline. And
Hmm. Hmm.
so your obviously is very quantitative heavy. So there's a certain like math rigor that's important. Problem solving, like group work, I think I heard a lot of that stuff as we were kind of talking too. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I agree. Like the quantitative heavy stuff, we also have a lot of problems that there's you can do by following like a set of steps, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being able to look at a problem and say, "Oh, this is like an energy type of problem because I am given this type of information,"
Yep.
right? And so being able to acknowledge what types of problems things are and then knowing what steps to take after that because those steps are going to be very similar depending on the type of problem that you're doing. So that's something that I will have students do also.
Mm.
Like when I'm asking questions in class, it's not just like well, what's our known information here? It's what's our next step, right? Because that's one thing that I want to make sure students walk away with. And my last note is that when you are doing some of these things in the classroom and you're asking questions and you're waiting for students to respond, make sure you're actually waiting for students to respond, right? Like wait time
Yes.
is a huge thing. I was doing an observation where I had somebody say, any questions? Okay, so like there was there
And
was
sometimes
barely a breath.
sometimes folks don't even look up when they ask that question.
Yeah. I like have trained myself to count to seven, like
Ooh,
in my head.
that's long.
Like I will count to seven or 10. Yeah, I know. Um, and like just make sure I make eye contact, kind of like get a sense of how people are feeling as I look around the room. And sometimes like it's just a way of kind of framing that too, because students, when you ask any questions, right? Because there's a good you can sometimes think like oh nobody asked any questions so they must all understand right
Right.
which is not the case
No.
but it's this whole thing that is very similar to the bystander effect where like students are sitting there and like I'm probably the only one with questions like everybody else knows what's going on like I'm gonna look stupid if I
For
ask
sure.
and I will sometimes try and pivot around from any questions to like what questions do you have
I was going to
or
say that.
like
Yep.
ask me two questions. Like I will just be very
Yes.
direct and
Mm-hmm.
like say, ask me two questions. Like I want your two questions, right? And sometimes I'll get some silly stuff and I'll be like, okay, so it seems like we're good. Like we're good. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Cool. Um, well, I think that's sort of a natural segue for us then to start talking about some summative assessments, some ways that students can demonstrate in more high stakes ways that they have achieved your learning targets or their learning targets.
That was part of our episode.
Did you not want to talk about summative stuff? We don't have to.
I thought it was just going to be formative because I remember having this conversation where you're like, formative is probably enough for a whole episode, so I only plan for formative. We can save summative assessment for
I'm
another
prepped
episode
for our summative assessment episode.
That sounds good.
That's good. Oh my god. So what's good? Anything exciting happening in the engineering and physics department?
Are you asking for the podcast or are you asking?
I don't know. I forgot that we have to close the podcast.
Cut that.
All right. Thanks for joining us today. And there's a teaser. There's going to be a summative assessment episode in the future.
Probably. You're all prepped for it. We have to do it now. Yeah. All right. Well, you've only got 10 minutes until your next lecture. Get back to class.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye. All right. I'm going to stop recording everything.
Yeah.